So the one thing I wanted to just remind people who haven't been here before, even if you have, is that these webinars are an offshoot of our mindfulness practice. Adriana and I kind of came up with this idea to amplify voices of those who aren't normally heard as a way for us to begin to understand more deeply. And Thich Nhat Hanh is the teacher that Adriana and I have been students of. And one of the things he says is about, talks about these bodhisattvas. And one of the bodhisattvas, Samantabhadra, is the bodhisattva of great action. And he says that in order to act deeply, we must understand and love deeply. And these webinars are about understanding and loving deeply. He goes on to remind us that we need the eyes of Manjushri, which is to understand, the heart of Avalokiteshvara, who's the bodhisattva of great compassion, and the hands of Samantabhadra, the bodhisattva of great action. So we need all of those if we want to make a difference in the world. So these webinars are about understanding and letting our understanding lead us to love and action. Okay, with that, we'll have a bell and we'll breathe together for a few moments before we begin. And just taking these last moments of the bell to settle into your body. Come home to your body in whatever state of health it might be in this evening. Arriving here in this community of support and care, surrounded by this Sangha. I'll turn it over to Adriana now. But you're muted, Adriana.
Sorry. I'm going to start again. Thank you everyone for being here tonight. And we have the great honor to have Kaitlyn here with us tonight. And Kaitlyn Hatch is an artistic graphic designing, wordsmithing wonderkind who has received certification in not-for-profit management, graphic and print design, British Sign Languages, psychology, and more. A Dharma practitioner since 2008, anti-racism and commitment to our collective liberation is core to their spiritual practice. They are a student of Poma Chodron and practice adjacently with both the Bhumish Parsha and the Radical Dharma community. They completed Buddhist chaplaincy training at the Upaya Zen Center in March 2021. As a multi-genre writer, Kate has self-published 2 books and managed a long-running blog where she's published the Lojong Practice Journal, a reflection on the 59 Lojong slogans through the lens of social justice. She also uses the blog to share creative nonfiction pieces, Buddhist philosophy, book reviews, reflections on writing, and the occasional poem. When non-writing, Kate can be found making all the mixed media art. Her current artistic work is creating a series of tanka pieces called Representations Matters, depicting Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in all different embodiments. She donates a significant amount of the sales of her artwork to organizations working for racial, trans, and queer justice. Originally from Canada and resident of the UK for 6 years, they currently live in the Coast Salish territories of the Pacific Northwest with their beloved unicorn and their cat Delirium, where they pay real rent to the Duwanish Nation, enjoy sharing the abundance of their garden with neighbors and friends. Thank you so much, Kate, for being here with us tonight. And the floor will be open for Kate, and we will be enjoying the sharing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adriana and Annie, for hosting this space and for inviting me to share with everyone this evening, afternoon, evening, depending on where you are. I see some familiar faces, which is exciting, and mostly new faces, which is also very exciting. I want to begin just acknowledging that my greatest intention is to create the kinds of community spaces where folks feel comfortable meeting their access needs. And access needs are something that we all have. We all have, if we're here, access to devices and to Wi-Fi, to the time and availability and energy to be present. So I thank you for your presence today. And I also want you to take care of your needs. This is a space where I recognize that you have a body and I have a body, and bodies can be inconvenient and they can let us know that we're not paying attention in different ways. So I invite you to pay attention to your body. So turn off your camera if you want to, if that's easier for you. Feel free to go and get snacks if you need to, get water, stretch your body, move around, grab some knitting, whatever will help you to be present and enjoy our time together. It's also really important to acknowledge that self-care is community care. When we take care of ourselves, we can show up in community, and when we take care of our community, we can take care of ourselves. So I do invite anyone who feels comfortable and would like to share in the chat any access needs that you might have. For myself, I'll let you know that I have a connective tissue disorder. It is quite unpredictable. And in its unpredictability, today I have a pinched vertebrae in my neck and I'm dealing with quite a lot of discomfort. But thankfully, I have some different concoctions that I can use in a heat pad, and that is helping. So I am meeting my access needs in that way, but I may adjust my body in unusual ways. And when it gets to the point that we're doing sort of an exchange, I may turn my camera off so I can adjust while I'm listening to you, but I will, I promise, be listening. It's more so I'm not like making a bunch of movement here on the camera. That's distracting. So yeah, I invite anyone who would like to, please do type in to the chat any access needs that you have. Acknowledge things like you may be a caregiver. You may have an animal that might show up and be a distraction. You might need to turn off your screen. Whatever there is. Oh, we've got Breeze. Thank you for captions. Access needs are being met through captions. Max will need to stand and move occasionally. It's good. Take care of your body. Thank you, Max. Anyone else? Kim, access needs are being met. Thank you. We'll likely stay off screen. It's been a long day. Acknowledge that. A lot of us, I get screen fatigue as well. Iris may need to go pee. Take those bio breaks as you need them. Just remember to like turn your video off in the audio. Val may need to stand, have a herniated disc. Oof, feel this? Adjusting your body is really good. Joanne, I turned 80 this year and I'm a bit tired from multiple Zooms today. Congratulations, turning 80. So yes, please do stretch, adjust your body, take care of yourselves. All right. And access needs change. So adapt as needed. So I want to begin with an acknowledgement that Buddhism originated in what we now know as India, and it was an oral tradition throughout Asia, and that was long before it became a scholarly tradition that has been dominated by a lot of white people. And this is really important because this is a path of liberation, so it's important to name these things. So while ableism, patriarchy, white supremacy, and other divisive and dualistic systems have and do influence Buddhism, it is a belief system that has grown out of an understanding of our interconnectedness. I'm immensely grateful to teachers like Zenju Earthlyn Manuel, Lama Rod Owens, and Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams for illuminating the influence of these divisive systems and honoring that Buddhism is an earth-based practice that's rooted in our place within nature and not apart from it. And in particular, I want to thank my primary teacher, Ani Pema Chodron, for teaching the Dharma in a way that I could understand it. For Lama Rod, for offering meditation practice with language that supports presence in the body, regardless of the physical position that I happen to be in. And most importantly, in influencing me in my practice with disability justice, with anti-racism, Zenju Earthlyn Manuel, and this book in particular called The Way of Tenderness. This has been incredibly influential and supportive in my practice, as you can probably tell by all the little notes sticking out of it. She has really illuminated for me the relationship between the relative and the ultimate and their inseparability. She offers a lot of clarity in that book that has really helped me. The subtitle here, so that you know, is Awakening Through Race, Sexuality, and Gender. And it is quite easy to also add to that context, disability, for sure. And finally, I want to acknowledge the disability justice movement. So for those who are not familiar with it, the disability justice movement is a relatively young movement that was created in direct response to the disability rights movement lacking an intersectional lens. So it's one, disability justice is led by Black, Indigenous, East and South Asian disabled folks, particularly queer and femme BIPOC folks. And it was in response to the disability rights movement in the 70s, just as there have been many movements in response to the lack of intersectional awareness, and specifically the white lens that a lot of movements in the 70s, the 60s and 70s held. So specifically, I want to uplift Alice Wong, who is the editor of Disability Visibility and also the founder of the Disability Visibility Project, as hugely influential in my practice around disability justice and integrating it with my Buddhist practice. And Imani Barbarin, who is also known as Crutches and Spice. That's her online handle in many places. So I am immensely grateful for both Alice Wong and Imani Barbarin's presence in the world and all the tools and insights that I've gained from what they offer through the many platforms that they have. And it is really important to recognize that disability justice is a movement that has always been led by people of color, and especially by femme folks of color. So thank you. And now I'm going to share a in-progress creative nonfiction piece. This is something that I wrote, I think about 4 months ago now it was, and I've been kind of playing around with it, and I thought that it would fit this gathering really well. Just to give like a bit of the context around it and how it arose is, when I first came to an understanding of disability justice, it was actually through my partner, because my partner was diagnosed with a chronic illness. And so they were learning what it was to have unpredictable symptoms. And I was in a position of being a caregiver. And in their path of becoming aware of what it is to be disabled in our world, I realized that I had always had a disability, but I didn't want to claim that word for many reasons, reasons of internalized ableism, and then also because of the comparing mind. I felt like I wasn't disabled enough. So I have hypermobility spectrum syndrome. It's got different names. It's an offshoot of Ehlers-Danlos, as some people have heard of, but more commonly, if you don't have a diagnosis of it, it's double jointedness. So that kid that you maybe have known who could like bend their arm backwards, it's a neat party trick, and also it's not great for your body to do things like that, even if your body can. And so as I have aged, and as bodies are, as they do as you age, I've had to reckon with the fact that I live with a lot of pain. And also my body does weird things. I dislocate joints sometimes. I deal with a lot of tension headaches and migraines. And as I started to understand that, first of all, this was a valid part of my experience, I also started to really expand my understanding of what disability means and why we have the attitudes that we have. And so much of this was because I've got this great practice of being mindful and aware and kind of watching what's going on in my body and what am I being told about disability and who gets to be disabled or what it looks like. And I realized that actually when I first started practicing meditation in 2008, it was because of disability, but I wouldn't have told you that. I wouldn't have framed it that way. It was because of anxiety, but I didn't see mental illness as a recognized mental illness as a disability until I entered into looking at this like disability justice movement and understanding the intersectional lens that it brings to it, and also the broader implications of the way our society decides who is able and what ableness looks like. So I've been moving through all of this, and it was about 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago now, actually, that I started to say, oh yeah, I'm a disabled person. That is a part of my humanity and how I am in the world. And I explored a lot of that through my writing. And I signed up to a fantastic course through Hugo House, which is a local writing house here in what is currently known as Seattle. And I signed up to this course that was run by Emily Rapp Black, who is a phenomenal memoirist, and I highly recommend. And she gave us different prompts each class, and the class was called Reading and Writing Disability. And one of the prompts that she gave was if you could share about a time when you either regretted or were glad that you disclosed your disability. And mostly I could only think of times that I regretted it because I thought about anxiety and how disclosing mental illness often did not go well for me. And so I challenged myself with that prompt to write something about a time I was glad I disclosed my disability. And what was interesting was that it led me to an experience that I had in a Dharma practice space. So I'm going to share that with you now. And then I will open it up for reflections, thoughts, discussion. I don't like to do questions and answers. I think questions and responses are better because Answers can get us stuck. So I invite you to, if you need to change your position, get yourself into whatever, like, I'm going to listen to a little story here. This is a creative nonfiction piece that is as of yet untitled. I would also take title suggestions if anyone has ideas at the end. Standing in the sun, I looked around the circle at my fellow Buddhist chaplains in training. We were a few days into this intensive, a mix of classes, meditation, and jukai preparation, and finding the rhythm we always did in the schedule of the day. After morning meditation and breakfast, this gathering of chaplains and residents was when the whole community was in one space, just before we moved on to our work assignments. It was the space where announcements were made, first by the group lead for the day on behalf of the general community, and then by anyone else who had anything to share. My hand trembled as I raised it to indicate I had something to say. All morning and the previous evening, I had been rehearsing, but still, my throat clenched when the circle leader nodded, inviting me to speak. So I began awkwardly, fumbling to reach the rehearsed message in my head. I have a condition I was born with, a disability that means I live with chronic pain. I promised myself that on this intensive, I would listen to my body and take care of it. And so I've been using a back jack on my cushion for meditation. But people keep cleaning it up. They keep moving it away. And every time we go to meditate, I have to find it again. So please, if you see extra cushions or a back jack, or someone has a chair set up in a certain way, don't touch it. Trust that it's there for a reason. My palms are sweaty, and it's not just because of the warmth of the day. I swallow hard and look down, knowing there won't be a response because there never is when someone makes an announcement. The group lead thanks me and asks if anyone else has anything to announce. No one does, and so we break to go about our assigned tasks for the next hour. The first person to approach me blushes, looking slightly ashamed. I cleaned up your back jack. It was me, she says. She was my roommate during the first intensive for this program. I know her well, and I know she is deeply committed to social justice and radical political change. I smile reassuringly. You certainly weren't the only one to do it, but thank you for the apology. She looks sheepish, and I understand. Ableism is insidious. My own journey to noticing it is ongoing. I am grateful to have a practice that is about being present, about asking questions, about becoming familiar with the poison of ignorance. The next person to approach me wants to understand my condition. What is your disability? She asks. I've become used to this question. The condition I have is not noticeable at a glance, and we are taught that disabilities are obvious, or they ought to be. I explain hypermobility and my very recent realization that the way pain gets talked about in Buddhism doesn't really account for the chronic sort. That I'm learning not to push stoically through meditating in a particular way, risking migraines, dislocation, and immobility just because it's taught as superior. I'm learning to accommodate the reality of my body, to listen to it, to honor when my muscles need a rest. She thanks me. She says she didn't know and that she will be mindful in the future of the language that she uses. The third person to approach me also wants to know about the condition I have, and we quickly realize that we are both zebras, born with elongated tendons and a host of unpredictable symptoms, rarely the same in any two people. I gave it to my daughter. She bruises so easily. Do you bruise? No, I say. I don't get the bruising, but I get the head rushes and the heart palpitations. I'm scheduled to see a cardiologist soon after finally getting a medical diagnosis for something I've obviously always had. She nods, knowing. She's in her 60s, but also didn't get diagnosed until later in life, when doctors gave a reason for the elasticity of her daughter's skin. We bond as we share tips for meditation, posture support, as well as dietary things and simple, easily sustained muscle strengthening exercises that won't make things worse for us. We also laugh in that way that you need to about the absurdity of internalized ableism, how it teaches us that disability is permanent and fixed, and how even as Buddhist practitioners, as people with insights into the impermanence of reality when it comes to relationships and jobs and other aspects of our health, it's been a journey to accept for this aspect. Before I made my announcement, I had a little voice in my head telling me people would take it the wrong way. I was worried about coming across as blunt, rather than simply asserting my needs for access, a thing that everyone has to some degree. I feared being met by all the worst sides of an ableist culture. Instead, I was met with an apology, gentle curiosity, and a fellow bendy spoonie who had also been learning to listen to the particular story their body has to tell.
Would you like a bell?
Yeah. Thank you. So that is what I prepared. And I would be happy to hear from anyone, any thoughts, reflections, any questions or queries you may have. I will also posit this with, I feel like I'm still very new to the disability justice journey, and do not consider myself an expert, but I am also a secret librarian, and I am likely to bombard you with resources, and I will do my best to make sure that there are links available.
Kate, do you want people to open their mics to ask questions? You want people to write in the chat? Do you want us to, how do you want to manage this space right now?
Because it's a small group, if folks want to unmute themselves and ask a question, that's great. But if you're more comfortable typing in the chat, I also invite that.
Perfect.
But I like to hear people's voices. It's nice.
And Annie, bowing in, I'll just also maybe offer that if it's okay that we, for those of us who are practitioners, we use the basic Dharma guidelines and we don't comment on somebody else's sharing, if that's okay. And we share from our own experience or ask questions from our own experience.
Adriana bowing in. If that okay, I can start. I want to share and I want to ask you because I was also diagnosed with dysautonomia. I did the tilt table and all the journey of this, which is very similar to what Kate has. But I was also denying it a lot. And when my daughter, of course, my two daughters have the same diagnosis, and my daughter wanted to have like a special accommodations in college at NYU. And I was really mad about it because I was telling her I was able to go, without anybody noticing that I was like having all this on myself. You can do it. You just fight and you just like fight the need to get to sleep at every moment because you are so tired. I mean, a lot of things like that. And I have been like fighting now with the feeling of guiltiness with her, but also with my own feelings of not being recognizing. Actually, with this series, thanks to Annie and thanks to you, I have been like reflecting on what I was like denying of myself. So what is your reflection and your suggestions about the non-visible, because this is making visible, the non-visible disabilities that we have? How can we manage and how can we share that with the people and get to know and have and shift these images of the wheelchair and all the images that we have about disabilities that are completely different, and we all have some disabilities or different abilities that because also these conditions have let us know do things differently. So what do you think about the non-visible disabilities?
Yeah. In my personal experience, it's been really interesting because a large part of me coming to the path of Buddhism was learning to be present with things that I didn't want to be present with, and knowing that I had to be, right? So I was in a state of really intense anxiety, which I am very good at masking. And why am I good at masking it? I'm good at masking it because often we get met if we share that level of vulnerability of mental illness. People see it as either it's a problem that then they have to try and fix. And I know I used to have that sort of attitude myself. Or it's something to be really wary of. You know, we look at media to see some very alarming depictions of mental illness. And so I didn't want to look at it in myself largely because I didn't feel that it was valid for different reasons, but also because of what we're told counts, right? And what I find really fascinating, the more I do this, is the more I basically model just talking about it, just telling people like, oh yeah, I have a wicked headache today, or I have had like a 3-day tension headache, or oh, today I need to use a cane because my foot's doing this thing it does. And I can't quite explain, or my knee, that's always a fun one. My tendons in my knee do weird things. You're like, well, I can't put pressure on that. And just by talking about it, it's interesting how often someone else will also share something that I didn't know, right? And you can't see it. And that sort of that assumption that we can see the fullness of a person just by looking at them. Even though we know that's not true, because we know it's not true of ourselves. Like we know that when people encounter us, they miss a lot of things, like a lot of things. And so I think like so much of it is in that first stage of going, oh, I need to look at it in myself and recognize it. And part of that also is how comfortable you are with sharing with people. So I'll say like a big part of my journey was influenced by my partner, where I would share things about my body, which because I was in a relationship where I finally felt comfortable sharing those things, first of all, that was a big part. And then they would point out to me like, that's not usual, right? Like, you get like head rushes every day. That's not common. That doesn't usually happen. I was like, oh, really? Because that's the other thing about it, is when it's your body and it's what you're used to, you just kind of do the thing, right? So if I actually am honest and I look back on it, I was like, oh, wow, I started having chronic pain when I was about 13, 14. But I didn't realize that because in my head, chronic meant constant. I was like, well, I'm in pain like, 5 days a week, but not all the time. Right? And it becomes sort of absurd when you really look at it, but it was not something I'd ever looked at. And then I think as well, this tendency as humans, just to speak to your point there, Adriana, of when you know that you've struggled through something for so long and you're kind of like, well, I did it. And it is kind of like it's like an interesting cultural attitude that I definitely, I know I reckon with it in myself in different areas. And for sure, like I went through years of having to carry like ridiculously too heavy rucksacks that clearly wrecked my back. So, kids these days are really lucky. They just have to carry around a laptop. But also thinking like, why shouldn't we take care of each other? Why shouldn't it be easier for other people? Because it was hard for us, like to go, oh yeah, it was really hard to mask my anxiety for so many years. And as soon as I was able to talk about it and find community and find other people who are like, oh yeah, here's different ways I manage it, or just someone to sit with you and be like, I acknowledge that's how you feel right now. And that's okay as part of being human. And also like, I think Adriana, you probably feel this. I know I felt it when we met, is like when you meet someone with your particular also condition, you're kind of like, ooh, it's like being in a club. I have quite a few friends who are ADHD and autistic, and when they meet other autists and the ADHD folk, they just go all in on like, let's share resources. Let's talk about the things that aid us. And this is a big concept in disability justice, which is access intimacy. It's about how you share what you need, and that it is quite an intimate thing, because we live in an ableist society where it will get used against you. And that has, like, I have had to leave a job because I disclosed something about my disability, and was made very uncomfortable at that job, and made that it was my problem. That it couldn't possibly be because that manager was a bully. It must be because you're crazy, right? And when you meet other people who are like, oh yeah, I know what that feels like, and then it basically counters the divisiveness and the dualism of ableism, and then also it rubs up against the other systems. So it's all good work. You can't really challenge any system of oppression without starting to challenge all of them. I'm definitely very aware that ableism gets used a lot to uphold white supremacy. And so I work on that edge a lot as a white body in the world, where I'm like, okay, how can I use this whiteness to my advantage to point out how ableism is being weaponized in order to uphold whiteness, because that's not okay. The pandemic being a very good example of that. A lot of people who have invisible disabilities, they have some sort of chronic illness, and the language that gets put out there is, it's only people with previously existing conditions. But when you really get down to the invisibility of disability, like disabled people are the largest minority in the world globally. And any country, any nation, it will always be disabled people who are the biggest minority that's not often represented. So by minimizing the value of someone's life because they have a comorbidity, it's like, I've lived my life, so far 36 years, quite well with comorbidities, and I'm still alive. And it would be nice if people recognized the responsibility we have to each other, which I feel like within the Buddha's context of this interconnectedness, like that is so much of it. What I said at the beginning, community care is self-care. And to me, that's what it is, to recognize that we are interconnected. And our relative experience can inform us about an idea of other relative experiences and how we can show up for each other and take care of each other, which is the only way we'll survive and thrive. Thank you.
So now's your chance to ask something or share something or offer something.
This is Natalie bowing in. Thank you, Kate. I think maybe it's still along the same lines of where you're going. It's just a question or statement. I've come across lately something that I say white people do in the name of efficiency, always trying to be able to do everything when it needs to be done, and then if you don't, you know, you're a pain in the ass person. Excuse my language. You're not a helpful person in society, and what we do to people, bully them, and all of that. You know, it costs lives. You know, I think maybe you could say more about that. I think about that in terms of it's just been Indigenous Peoples Day, uh, uh, Columbus, all that. That's kind of come up for me this week. And then, you know, how some people just aren't, I'm looking at my notes, aren't, they have an inability to receive what people have to offer. You know, everybody has some kind of value, but some people just can't find that part of the value and say that you're a value, you know. Anyway, Natalie bowing out.
Thank you for that, Natalie. I don't know that I necessarily have a response to that. I think it's exactly that, of when we are told that a human being has less value under white supremacy capitalism, we should all be very, very, very skeptical and wary, you know, about what is being served and who is being served in that. I'm wearing I'm wearing this shirt here. I'm going to show you. It says, "You are sacred." This is artwork created by Johnny J, who is a fabulous DigiGeek, and she is disabled, and she does a lot of really wonderful work about basically uplifting the value of everyone, because you are sacred, because you exist. You got precious human birth. Like, what else do you need? And all of the systems that tell you otherwise that's how we know, that's how we can kind of see through, like using that cutting of Manjushri's sword to see through it. Oh yeah, that system makes me doubt your humanity. It's probably not serving me or you or anyone else. Thank you, Max, very much. In naming Alice Wong, sorry, in the chat for anyone who didn't see it, Max says, thank you. I so admire your courageous sharing. It inspires me to be more honest and authentic. I really want to uplift like how Imani Barbaran and Alice Wong and a lot of other disability justice folks have modeled that for me. And no, that's the thing. You kind of give people permission when you show up as your full self. Sufa, apologies if I am mispronouncing your name. I see your hand is up.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kate and Annie and Adriana and all the angels who put this together. I was really touched. I was in tears for your beautiful sharing, Kate. Thank you. I really appreciated, your courage, and that you stood up for yourself. You advocated for yourself, and that is justice, right? And it got me to realize that we all have some, because we live in an ableist society, culture, that we all have times when we're in comparison disabled, whether they're like officially diagnosed or not. You know, if we're hungry or tired or that's, I push myself and mask that and not honor the needs of my body, and that doesn't count as being just or advocating for myself. And so, yeah, that's a sense of internalizing that oppression or oppressing myself too. So I really appreciate that insight because of your sharing. And I also like to invite your experience or sharing on experience and from your own and also from what you have heard or seen from others, is that what are some things that we can do in virtual spaces and physical spaces before people come in to make it known that we're disability sensitive, that we care, and that all disabilities, known or unknown, visible, invisible, are welcomed, and we would want to work with that in some ways. So what are some concrete things and things that would convey that very clearly, that you've seen that, oh yeah, that I would want to go there because I saw that or I heard that or they did this. So I'll be very interested to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you for your kind words. Yeah, the practical side of things. I think one of the first simplest ones is an accessibility statement, but an accessibility statement that's actually grounded in what will be offered and ensuring that's something that people are aware of. So the example of making visible, right, is really clear in all of the posts that go out. They say, like, we're going to have live captioning, and thank you, Dawn, you're doing a fab job. Yay to the angels in the background. Another thing is about language. So, you know, I'm a writer and I think about language a lot. I actually just published a post to my blog today about language, specifically around the way that pain gets talked about when you're in a meditation space. And usually it took me a really long time to realize, oh, you're talking about like kind of temporary pain while you're just sitting in this particular position. And I'm talking about, I'm going to be in pain for the rest of the day because I sat in that position for 30 minutes. We're not talking about the same thing. And how we think about language generally. So like sit is a really interesting one. Because actually sitting is not comfortable for me in the long run. Sorry, I'm multitasking here. I will just, because I got a little message. Oh, that's really long. I think that link works. Sorry, that the link that I just posted is to the article I published today. This is called the Dharma of Pain. Yeah, how do we talk about, like, when we say sit and people have a very particular idea, meditation must look this way. And a lot of the time, like a lot of meditation instruction that I got very early on, the focus on posture is, it's like 80% of it, right? And I pushed myself hard. And interestingly, it was when I went on a long retreat that I stopped pushing myself because I couldn't. It was a 49-day retreat. And after about 8 days, I realized, like, oh, this is really bad for my body. And fatigue. Fatigue is a really big thing that I live with and manage around, which anybody who's got any kind of chronic illness or you've got pain, like that is your body telling you to rest and take care of yourself. So another aspect that I find really interesting in some Dharma spaces I've been in is when people, when someone falls asleep and then it's like no big deal. It's like, oh, you fell asleep while you were meditating. Well, clearly your body needed a rest. You know, rest is really radical under white supremacist capitalism. and not resting so that you have energy to do stuff. Resting because you deserve to rest because you're a precious human being and that's part of your experience. And like a good nap is amazing and you should celebrate that. And yay, your body told you what it needed and you listened. And what else is our practice for, right? It's this liberatory experience. I also really appreciate specifically Lama Rod is a good example of an instructor. Like when he gives meditation instruction, he talks about the experience of the body and being present in the body in the way that feels uplifting rather than saying you have a particular posture. So there's like just a few things. Think of your language. Words matter because words aren't just the definition that they carry. They're also the call to action that they carry. It's what they do in how they land. So when you say sit, in my brain, I have to modify. I'm like, oh, we're going to meditate. And then I have to think about it. Okay, how am I going to? Oh, and now they're doing a guided thing where they're presuming I'm in a particular position. So I have to adapt that. But what if it was take a position that invites dignity and grace? That invites you to be present with the earth. In the introduction, Adriana says, I practice within the Bhumi Sparsha community. This is Lama Rod's, one of the co-founders of that community. Bhumi Sparsha is the Pali word, I believe, for the ground touching mudra. When Mara was like, shows up at the Buddha, to the Buddha, and is like, why are you such a big deal? You know, who's gonna, like, no one's watched you do this. You're just like sitting here all the time. And he touches the earth and says, the earth is my witness. The earth is always there. The earth is always holding us. We're part of the earth. We're of the earth. We're not separate from it. We don't have to go out into nature. We are nature. So what is it if we approach meditation from that view instead of, and then you need to sit in this particular way and your spine has to be aligned. So yeah, I hope that was some useful guidance for you.
Joanne bowing in. Kate, what a beautiful presentation. And I very much loved this story, your narrative nonfiction. It was from the heart and very powerful. And it seems to emphasize that even in spiritual communities where we articulate words of unity and compassion and love and all these aspirations, we don't always practice in that way. And you really reminded me of some situations I've experienced, but also opened my eyes to situations and vulnerabilities that I might not have been aware of. So thank you. I just wanted to share a little story that on my very first retreat with Thich Nhat Hanh, which was 30 years ago, a monk noticed that I was in pain, trying to sit cross-legged with severe arthritis in my hips and knees and ankles and hands. But I was brought up Catholic as a good little girl and trained to do what I was told. And it was my first time. So I am eternally grateful for him, and have been sitting on a chair in Buddhist communities ever since. So how can we even set up a room in a way that invites some variation of needs, perhaps. Thank you.
Thank you. My partner is a recovering Catholic, and I am very well aware that apparently that just doesn't go away. So this is a thank you for asking this question, because instantly I got a little story for y'all. The first time I went on retreat, so I had a weird path to Buddhism. I came to Buddhism through a therapist. My psychologist was like, you should try meditating because you really don't like being present, and we need to get you used to being present because that's where you are. And so she taught me to meditate, and basically she was my Sangha for years. And then in 2012, I decided, I was like, all right, I need to be on retreat. I'm going to try a retreat finally. And I went on this retreat, and they spent 2 hours. They gave us a 2-hour period of meditation where we just tried different positions. They had everything available for us in that shrine room. There was an assortment of cushions and chairs, and they had those the chairs where like your legs like go this way on it, like it's got the little pads, like, yeah, it was amazing. They had benches, and they invited us to choose a position, get into it, and then we would meditate for about 10 minutes. And then they would invite us to adjust our bodies as we needed to and get different stuff. And so this is my introduction to like a formal retreat setting. And I have never experienced it since in any other community I've been in. And I think about it a lot. I was like, that was kind of genius. I will say that one problem happened is that I found something that was comfortable. I found a bench that I really liked and a way of wrapping a blanket just so that like supported my hands and my laps so that my shoulders weren't like strained. It was so great. And then I kind of forgot that I could change that at some point if I needed to. It was like, oh, this works so really, really well. And I did it for that whole thing. And then I like just did that for years until I realized like, wait, no, it's not working anymore. But I think just like making that usual, giving time for folks to try out different positions. I will say in the context of the story that I shared, specifically, this is a thing I've encountered in Zen spaces. Most of my practice is in Tibetan spaces. They're very messy. They don't really care about this stuff. But in Zen spaces, there's a thing about the aesthetic. And so the reason that my backpack was getting cleaned up a lot of the time is because, you know, it looked messy. They wanted it to be uniform. And this is where I really, really want to uplift one of my favorite teachings from Zenju Earthlyn Manuel in this book. She has a whole chapter on it, but it's basically the theme of the book. She says there's multiplicity in oneness. So oneness isn't sameness. It's not uniformity. It's not homogeny. It's everything. I think just think about it that way, then it's like, oh, okay. So if you're trying to create a space where people feel welcome, like to come back to that point of people feeling welcome, if you walk into a space and you think, oh, this looks pretty homogenous, you're not going to, a lot of people are going to walk right back out. So having things like you walk in and you see there's an assortment of cushions available, there's chairs, and then being explicit, like just saying it, putting that accessibility statement out there. And in these Zoom spaces too, things like saying, like, turn your screen off if you have to, your video off if you have to, and change your position, move around, find the things that work. Thank you. Kim, your hand is up.
Hi, thank you for your sharing this evening and your wisdom and experience. It's Kim bowing in. Yeah, I think I appreciate more cues around of languaging. Like my Sangha, our caretaking team, at least half the Sangha is disabled, and we're still trying to find more ways to anticipate and make a safer space and change ableist language that we've already internalized or So it's always great to learn things that are like second nature to some spaces and maybe new to others. So one question we've been sitting with a lot is language around walking meditation and changing it maybe to like we've decided like instead of saying you're gonna stand or you're gonna rise, because and like using language describing that, you know, what rising internally can feel like, or and maybe changing the word walking meditation to movement meditation. So I'm curious if you have any more like internalized new language around that space, and also with creating like a more welcoming space for neurodivergence. And I know those are two different, and maybe you want to pick one for time, or I don't know how many other questions there are, but those are two things that are on my mind that we're thinking about, and like even having lived experience with are still kind of learning best practices and new practices. So thank you.
I think that sounds just the experimentation. Like that's a big part of it. The playfulness, the trying it out as a community is really big, right? One of the principles of disability justice, so there are 10 principles of disability justice, which you can find on the Sins Invalid website. And they get adjusted and changed over time. And they're really great to practice with. Just think of them as like slogans that you can practice with. And one of them is leadership of the most impacted. And I'm beginning to understand that one in particular, not as saying like, oh, well, like the people who are most impacted should be in a leadership role. Like we should burden them with the labor. It's more of just like, listen to and like recognize what you're being told, because you don't know someone's relative experience, right? So like I cannot stand, I will never be able to stand or wear the shoes or be in the experience of another person. I am in this relative experience, and every other relative experience is just as valid. And so bringing that curiosity and that playfulness in, so saying like, okay, we want to make sure that like neurodivergent people find a sense of belonging and can practice in this space and is working. So just like asking neurodivergent people what works, what doesn't work. And also always remembering that no single person can be the representative of an entire group as well. So being open to adaptation, I think that's like another part of this, like the unlearning what we've been internalized. Like whiteness in particular gives us the sense we have to be perfect and we have to figure out the right way to do it. And the thing with all of this is like we're all babies, we're all learning, we're all at different points in this unlearning of the systems of oppression, and it's going to impact us differently depending on, you know, what our embodiment is of where our edge is in that learning. And so inviting those who are most impacted, which you don't have to like ask them, their stories are there, you can find it. Like it's you know, just follow somebody online who's already you know, doing some mindfulness teaching, who's a neurodivergent person. There's a lot of really good, if you look into basically if you look up autism advocacy, that's a really good way to find folks who are sharing things, tools, ideas, stuff that works to support autistic people and ADHD people, because there's a lot of overlap there. And then there's also the people who are autistic and ADHD. So the resources are there to be had, and then that openness to adaptation and building as a community, recognizing it's like, no, I can't be the expert in figuring it out. That's not my job. I just have my relative view, and if I can uplift as many relative views as possible, then we can create a space that's going to be welcoming and inclusive. And remembering too that access needs can conflict, and that's another fun thing to work with. Speaking of neurodivergence, I know that there are some neurodivergent people for whom captions would be the worst. It would just, you're like, I'm so distracted and I can't. So that's why it's good to be able to turn them on or off. And then again, it's that playfulness, being in community, access, intimacy. How can we figure out ways that we can participate together, acknowledging that my meeting one access need may in fact actually create a barrier for another person. There's a really good example of this in an episode of This American Life, which I'm not going to remember what the title of the story is, but is someone with a stutter shares about being invited to some sort of like poetry slam or something like that, as like a spoken word thing. And there's a time limit. And they have a stutter. And they create the time limit to create it so like everyone gets a fair amount of time. And he prepares something that if he doesn't stutter will fit in that time, but he's going to stutter. So it's that thing where you need to have some flexibility around it too all the time, like adaptation around it all the time. We can't bring the world to a static, fixed state. We can just respond. And that's the work of the Bodhisattva. Fun times. Thank you.
Hi, I was going to talk if no one else has something to say. I wasn't planning to talk, but new to your group. Thank you. Appreciated your talk very much. Appreciate all of you. You know, I wrote in the chat box that I'm a slow typer because I have a limb difference, and that was actually the first time I've announced that to a group. And I thought your talk was so it just highlighted everything. I thought it was just such a great story, but it made me think about my own journey. And, you know, I spent most of my life, you all talk about invisible disabilities. I have a visible disability, and I spent my life trying to make it invisible. And when you do that, you hide a lot of who you are. And so I think it's that fear of vulnerability that we've been taught. It's a lot of lessons we've been taught over the years, but I think I was told I had a disability from very young when there was name calling. You know, that's how it starts out. And then I had this opposite message from my family that there's nothing, quote, wrong with you. You're just like us. And so you get really confusing messages. And as a child, you don't know what to do with that. So I hope some of you can relate to this. You know, so I remember at the age of 12 saying, well, wait a minute, I belong. I mean, I actually used those words because I felt so weird and different. I think at the age of 22, I was in grad school, social work, did my internship in a higher ed in a disability department. And I realized I had a disability. You know, it was just so strange. So I guess the thing I'm trying to say is you re-identify, you relearn, you unlearn. It's a constant process. Now I have different disabilities because my use of my predominant left hand now causes headaches because I've overdeveloped one side. And I was reluctant to believe that was happening to me, you know, because that can't be happening. You know, it's just, you know, lots of denial. So it's just this, this progression. And now, you know, at 59, I'm finally getting okay with saying this is who I am with this limb difference. and not choosing to hide. And, you know, the mentality is hide so that people will like you, and then they won't have a choice because they already like you. You know, it's just a lot of, I guess I'm just sharing all of the vulnerabilities we endure and learn about and accept. And then through that comes the strength and the, I don't know if you could say something about closing that up. I would really appreciate that. So thank you again, Kate. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, what came up for me just listening is, so Imani Barbarin, I just really like her because she's very funny. She's very, very funny. And I love anyone who can speak truth to power and also make me laugh while doing it. It's great. She talks a lot about, so she has cerebral palsy, and she talks a lot about when disabled kids are told by their family, like, oh, you're just like us, how it's just like, you're not setting them up for what they need to be able to advocate for their needs, to be able to recognize, like, it's she gets a lot of, she's just very blunt basically to parents of disabled kids, of being like, you don't get to claim their identity as part of who you are. You are not disabled, your kid is. And to support them in the world in a meaningful way, you really need to just be honest about what they're going to experience in the world. And I think this is, you know, again, the way that we are taught systems of oppression, that particularly happens in school, right? I can tell you that the bullying that I experienced in junior high was gender policing, because I wasn't the right kind of girl. I didn't dress in the right way. I didn't like the things that I was being told heavily, and all of the other girls around me were being told heavily we needed to like. And then I also wasn't necessarily getting a model that was okay, that I was different, although I did get it from home. So I was really fortunate that way. I had a mother who was like, whatever, wear whatever you want, look however you want, it's fine, you know, dye your hair blue as long as I don't have to pay for it. So I think and this is one of those things where you can see how these systems, when they come into place, and how they grind up against each other, and the deep wounding that they cause around being able to find, being able to get your access needs met, to get the care that you need in the world, that you should get because you're an amazing, precious human being. And then also to find community and you know, yeah, talk to other people where it's like, oh, we have some sort of affinity, right? Like, there's a lot of conversation around affinity when it comes to racialized groups. And I think there's a lot that any group, like anyone where from an identity that gets marginalized, can really learn a lot about affinity groups, and that finding community and connection and the power that it has. So I am very grateful that this felt like a space where you could share that. And may there be more of those for you always, and for everyone here. May we create the kind of spaces where people can be honest about their bodies, because we have them. Everyone has them. And as many people have said repeatedly too, and this is a thing about disability that is different from all of the othered categories. It's the one that any single person can find themselves within at any given time. So I shared about my partner. Until 2017, they were just generally very healthy and didn't have very many physical ailments, and now they have a chronic illness. And they are going to have a chronic illness for the foreseeable future. So any one of us at any point, this is like another thing that comes out of disability justice. We're all temporarily able. And ability is so personal. That's why I don't like using the term differently abled. It really grates on me because it presumes that there is a standard of ability and everything else is different. I'm like, what is different? Everyone's differently abled. Nobody has the same abilities. So recognizing that, and then recognizing the value that we can contribute to community because of our affinities. Yeah, thank you.
Dear Making Visible Sangha, we have a few more minutes. So it sounds like Camille wanted to say something. So we have maybe like 5 more minutes before we start to wrap up. Annie bowing out.
Thank you so much, Kate. Wow, that was really inspiring, your sharing, and I've learned so much. Just beautiful. And this isn't really a question, but it's just a comment that everything you say really resonates with me, and it's starting to bring tears to my eyes because one of our daughters has had an emotional disability disorder for years. She's now 20, but it took a long time to convince the school system that she had a disability, a long time. And we fought, and you know, finally, I guess, I don't know if she, when she was in high school, it was maybe her sophomore year, and you probably know what a 504 is, but she was finally given a 504, which enabled her to have accommodations and accessibility, and she could get a pass and leave a class anytime she needed to go see her social worker, which was a godsend for her. But it's just amazing that the school system, they just, you know, they're just so far behind in terms of, you know, they get the physical disabilities, they can see it, but they have a really hard time with the emotional disorders and disabilities. So thank you so much. Really resonated with me.
Thank you. Thank you for being an advocate for your child. That's really awesome. And I can say, as someone who's had a mother who has stepped up to the plate to support me around anxiety, it is really invaluable. You know, we're coming up on time, so I'll keep this brief. I also just want to add one thing that is a big part in all of my practice, something I'm aware of. The systems aren't broken. They are functioning exactly as they were built to function. And the school system is part of that. And the school system in North America in particular was largely a tool of genocide and assimilation. And accommodations for physical disabilities came out of the disability rights movement and the ADA. And even the ADA is still not enough. it's totally not enough. So it's because of advocating and agitating and pushing those edges that we see the change that we see, but we need new systems. We need school systems that are built on care and reciprocity and not about propaganda. Thank you.
Just checking if anyone has one last small thing they'd like to say before we finish. Doesn't seem like it. So I just want to thank Kate so much for this evening of ease. It was very easeful in a way that was really beautiful. So, and Mary's saying yes. And yes, a really, really lovely teaching just in the way that it was presented. So thank you for that. And just for all of us, I think we're here because we are on this path of the Bodhisattva, and it's not, it begins with understanding, and then it moves to love and action. So whatever, you know, I heard people talking about their Sangha and how we can make it more accessible and welcoming. And I hope that's what we'll all do, is keep moving toward that non-existent goal, just like keep opening more and more, making, allowing for all kinds of people to be able to be with us. So just thank you all so much for being here. And I know Adriana probably wants to say something too, so I'll turn it over now that she's back. I think she got dropped off a couple of times. Bowing out.
Adriana bowing in. Just to thank you again, Kate. This was wonderful. And for me, it was really touching, for example, that some accessibilities for some people is a burden to other ones. And I think that's important. And I also think it's important to talk about them. I had an experience in our Sangha once, and it was like, should I say something or not? So I think we like also acknowledging that it will be important. And thank you so much for opening our eyes to all of these different situations that we can have. Thank you everyone for being here also.
And a shout out to Rachel, who's here, who does all our communication, and also Don, who did all of our closed captioning. Yay! And Claire's not here, who also does some of our social media. And am I forgetting anyone else on the team that covers it for now? Yeah, so thanks everybody. And then I want to thank everybody who donated. And if you didn't, that's totally fine too. So we're just appreciating that you were willing to come and take the time out of your day. These videos will be up on the website. This video will be up on the website at some point. Can't guarantee exactly when, but you'll also get an email with it if you wanted to go back or share it with somebody. That would be great. Kate, do you have anything you want to say last, or Adriana?
I just want to invite everyone to follow our social media. We